Hi, this is Ben, aka Merlini, and I wanted to talk about this pretty interesting article that I saw written by Business Insider a couple of months ago, and it was regarding 20 cognitive biases that screw up your decisions. And this article was, I think, mostly written for monetary purposes like investing or business decisions, and a lot of it can actually be applied to Dota. Not all 20 of these can be applied to Dota, but oftentimes they can be. And the first step to getting better in Dota, I would say, is being able to identify your mistakes. And a lot of people ask me, oh, how do I improve? How do I improve my MMR? What should I think about when I'm playing a Dota game? And a lot of the times I just say introspection and being able to concentrate on your own mistakes so that you can improve. And not only are there Dota mistakes that you need to concentrate on, it's also just like cognitive and like mental mistakes that people make like way too often, and that just impair their judgment and make them reach this certain like plateau where you feel like you're not improving in Dota. And Dota is such a mentally intensive and taxing game, and it's really easy to recognize that if you've ever been like super tired or maybe drinking a little bit before you play Dota. And you'll notice that you'll lose a lot more, you'll make terrible decisions, you'll die a lot more because of how much focus is necessary in order to win this game. And you could probably teach a whole class about the mentality aspect of Dota, and a lot of these biases will be listed in such a class. So I wanted to go through, I think, about 8 of them that I selected myself out of the 20, and some of them I can just go through pretty briefly. Anchoring bias, not terribly relevant. Availability heuristic. People overestimate the importance of information that is available to them. A person might argue that smoking is not unhealthy because they know someone who lived to 100 and smoked 3 packs a day. So this one I just want to touch upon briefly. I think a good example is what people see on Reddit. And let's say someone who has never played Dota before comes to the Dota subreddit immediately after Reborn is released. There's going to be like so many people complaining about bugs and the armory being crap and, you know, all these things that just weren't the same as Source 1. And overwhelmingly, like let's say like 9 out of 10 posts that are about Reborn are just going to be overwhelmingly negative, instead of all the other information that isn't directly available to them that points to Dota actually being a really good game, Reborn being a step in the right direction, Valve fixing a lot of bugs that were in Source 1 that unfortunately introduced new ones in Source 2, and all these things that talk about how Dota is a really good game. The player growth has been, you know, pretty high for the past couple of years. People have been playing it for 10 years consistently, like myself, and don't really get bored of it. Because of the replay value of the game. And there's all these positive things about Dota that people don't really see because of the overwhelming amount of negative information that is easily accessible to them. And that's somewhat similar to like the bandwagon effect to the Reddit circle, as well as, you know, people just hopping on, oh, this team's awesome or this team's terrible just because everyone else thinks so. But the 4 main ones that I wanted to talk about of the first 10 are the blind spot bias, the choice supportive bias, the confirmation bias, as well as the ostrich effect. So the first one, blind spot bias, this one I'm not really sure why they put it out for, because I think it should have been later in their article, because blind spot bias kind of goes in hand with all of the other biases. You fail to recognize your own cognitive biases, your failure to recognize them rather is a bias in itself. People notice cognitive and motivational biases much more in others than in themselves. And I could cite so many examples of this, but an easy one is like, this Swedish person thinks that Alliance is a really good team, and you're probably like, oh, well, he probably just likes Swedish teams in general, and you're going to kind of dismiss his argument because you think that he is nationalistic and mostly just like Swedish players, which may be true, but at the same time, have you thought about like yourself and how you are biased towards, like, let's say your friends make a bad decision, that you and your other friends think that, oh, he's just doing the right thing, he's doing what he needs to do, because your friend's a good person. And how often do you recognize your own cognitive bias. Wow, my friend's actually like a really terrible person. I should not be friends with him because he's done this terrible act. Most of the time you try and justify it. It's like, oh, you know, he's just doing what he needed to do. And rarely will you hear about that. Rarely will you hear about people talking about their own cognitive biases. There's always someone else who's messing up in Dota. There's always someone else who's, you know, dragging the team down. There's always someone else that's hindering you from getting higher MMR, and there's this big blind spot in yourself. So if you have to turn a critical eye, make sure you turn it inwards often rather than outwards, because a lot of the times the cognitive biases are within yourself, not within others. Number 5 is choice supportive bias. When you choose something you tend to feel positive about, it, even if that choice has flaws. Like how you think your dog is awesome, even if it bites people every once in a while. You know, I actually have a dog that I think is awesome that bites people once in a while. So I was like, well, that's definitely applicable to me. And I think my dog is super amazing. His name is Douglas. He's super cute and he makes my family pretty happy. And I think he's awesome because of that. But at the same time, there are all these negative things about him. He does bite people. He likes to jump on people a lot, and you know, all these things that are negative, but I tend to overlook those because I think my dog is awesome. And this can be related to Dota because people always try and like justify their decisions in a positive way without looking at the flaws. Oh, I thought this hero pick was a good choice because of this, this, and this, but what are the flaws? What are the downsides of picking this hero? And or like an item build. Let's say you went like a Shadow Blade instead of a Blink, and you had your reasons of doing so, and you end up losing the game because you didn't have a Blink dagger instead. You're going to try and justify your Shadow Blade build. Oh, I got like solo picks on this, this, and this. But maybe you really needed the instant displacement, and that's a flaw that you tend to overlook because of the choice supportive bias. You're going to think that your own decisions are really, really good in the game and concentrate on the positive rather than the negative. Next one is confirmation bias. We tend to listen only to information that confirms our preconceptions. One of the many reasons it's so hard to have an intelligent conversation about climate change. This one is a very easy one to cite. I think many people know that I do not like Vanguard in Dota. I think it's just a huge waste of gold, and most of the time you can just buy a mech and it's a much better item, much more useful to your team, and just better. And when people try and talk to me about Vanguard, I would say, yeah, I'm pretty dismissive of it because I already have this bias that it's a terrible item and it's only good as a build up to Crimson Guard. And if people talk to me about how terrible Vanguard is, like, yeah, you know what's up. And I tend not to listen to the other side because I have this preconceived notion, even if they have good logical arguments. Oh, you know, it's better now, it's really good versus all these multiple damage sources and whatnot. But I'm much more easily dismissive of it because I'm already biased to not liking the item. And that's one that I can cite within myself. How many can you cite about how you are biased against a certain hero, against a certain item, against maybe a certain player because of your preconceived notions? And how unwilling are you to listen to things that are opposite of what you already conceive? So next one is the ostrich effect. The decision to ignore dangerous or negative information by burying one's head in the sand, like an ostrich. Research suggests that investors check the value of their holdings significantly less often during bad markets. And this one is also pretty easy to cite. In Dota, if someone's flaming you, you can just mute them, and you're ignoring negative information. You might try and justify it in your mind. Oh, this guy's, you know, just really ridiculous and he's just a toxic player that just is super negative. But just because it's negative information doesn't mean that it's not true, that it can't be useful. Like, he might have flamed your decision to not get the rune or, you know, go a certain build, and he might be right, but it's super easy just to kind of ignore him, mute him, and live in your own little fantasy world where you think everything is really positive and that you're an awesome player and you don't want to hear all the negative stuff. This happens all the time. People refuse to believe that they're at the MMR that they're at, or that they're either an average Dota player, and they just don't like hearing that. And it's similar to Dota, and once you realize that you are at this specific point that you are going to make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes in Dota, and once you can accept that and accept the negative information, you can kind of change your playstyle, because you realize that the negative information is still useful information even if you don't want to hear it. And then maybe you can spin your mind to think that, oh, this is positive information, even though it's, you know, talking bad about my play, because it can help me improve. I can utilize this. This can be very useful. So instead of, you know, trying to mute everyone that you meet that says one bad word about you, or, you know, curses once, then you can try and pick the useful information out of it instead of just ignoring it completely. And I think that's something that people do far too often. So those are the first 4. I didn't want to make too long of a video about it. So next week I will release the other half with the other cognitive biases that I thought were really important to improving your play in Dota. So thanks. See you guys next week.